Hey, welcome to Parent Conversations. It is week 6 of our 6-week Parent Conversation series. Today, we're going to talk about resources. Tim, thank you again for being our guest speaker. We're going to miss you after this week, but we're glad we've had you for the last 6. We'd like to thank the Bear River Health Department and the Central Utah Public Health Department and the Davis County Health Department for the grants that make Parent Conversations possible. So we hope that you enjoy them. And if you have something to say you want to share, please unmute yourself, raise your hand, or type it in the chat, and I will moderate. Okay, Tim, it's all yours.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here for the last one of our sessions here, week number 6. So it has been great to get to know some of you and to have an opportunity to talk about some of these things that we know are very important when we're talking about parents and families and people being able to get along well, communicate well, and do some things that we hope are appropriate for their own families and learn something about some of those things that they are capable of or are capable of. So week number 6, we're excited about it. This is just me again. We know about some of these things that I do. We do talk about introducing people. Most of the people that are here have been here before. Those of you who have not come or watching it a little bit later, we ask you to think about some of these questions for yourself as you're going through this process of, what can someone call you? What type of family structure do you have? If you don't know about nuclear families, blended families, extended, non-traditional, all those different things, foster families, multi-generational, all of those areas, please look them up and see what that means and see what it means to you and see if you fall into any of those categories so that you know when you're talking about some of these things regarding a family, what you can say that would be appropriate when you're talking to others. Part of what we do at USU Extension is we want to educate others to be successful. And part of that is knowing and understanding what happens around our world, around the world around us. So we think there's lots of great things going on in our communities, lots of great people, lots of great opportunities for knowledge, and trying to have a opportunity to talk with people who are different than us, I think becomes very important. I think it's when we learn the most is when we talk about something that we don't understand very well, and we get it from someone who's experiencing it. So please talk to others. We talk about locations, and then we talk about what you gain from attending a little bit. So after this presentation, we're going to kind of do some things at the end, talk about some of those resources specifically, but we're going to talk about local and other resources, recognize the importance of working together to reduce conflict, and then create a plan to suit your family, improving quality of life, really talking about the resources that we've had. As I talk about this, we talk about ground rules for discussions again. Remember, these are intended to be discussions amongst people to understand some of the things that we're doing and get people's input. So you see some of these things we've talked about in the past, getting good information, sharing successes, disclosure of sensitive topics, participate as you feel comfortable, then keep confidential things we do discuss in group if there's something that comes up. So we appreciate that from all of you. And as you even think about doing this on your own, if you're watching this as part of the recording, think about how you would talk about some of these topics with families, friends, neighbors, people that are close to you. How would you discuss some of these things that sometimes can be a little difficult to talk about and to understand? We talk about people learning, but we also talk about people not understanding at times. And I know that in some ways, many of us are more likely to say, yes, I understand, than we are to say, no, sorry, I don't understand. That's something we really want to try and encourage you, especially when we're talking about families, parenting, being a good provider, being a good person who's listening, all those things that goes along with having caregiver opportunities. I want you to really ask questions. We encourage our children to ask questions, or those that we are with to ask questions. We always want to answer those questions, and I think that that's something we don't do as adults. We sometimes forget that questions are very important for all of us to listen to and to learn from. So I encourage you to, really know what someone is talking about. Don't just go, I think they know, and just respond with a positive, yes, that's fine, I understand. I really encourage you to ask a question as to why, and why do you feel that way, and what's that really mean to you, or what could that mean to me? Give yourself an opportunity to think of many things that are different than you have thought about in the past. I think many of us get into that pattern of just accepting what's being said to us, instead of thinking about what's being said to us. So use that kindness, compassion, but in a way that's positive towards you and towards others. Okay, we've talked about a number of different things. We've talked about mental and physical health, importance of communication, kind of human development things, risk and protective factors when we're talking about mental health, drugs and alcohol, peers, all of that. Today we're going to talk a little bit about utilizing resources to improve our quality of life. But before we do that, we're going to kind of look at a couple of different things and see if we can review some of those areas we've spoken about here. As you know, we've talked about creating the SMART and super SMART goals. We want you to, again, try and do that when you have a chance with your family and loved ones or caregivers, whatever. Go through some things and see what you can do as a group. Talk with your families and loved ones and caregivers, wherever they might be, and find out what kind of goals they have. What kind of goals do you want to have as a family? When I talk about family, I talk about family in general terms. Doesn't have to be related to you in any way. Could be someone who's a child of a step parent, or as someone that you're fostering. To me, a family is a group of people that are together for a period of time that care about each other. So that's when we talk about family. That's what I'm talking about here. So what are super SMART goals? The big thing that I think separates super SMART goals are being able to actually talk about it out loud, and having someone have that opportunity to do things that are going to be public. So we talk about being public and presenting to your family or loved ones what your ideas are, and creating those goals and writing them down. I think you can work on that as a group or individually to start, and then bring it and present it to your group as a way to do some things that are pretty interesting. Okay. So I put some of these just information up here as we started. I don't know if there's any questions as we begin. Anybody have anything that's really been bothering them about something we've spoken about in the past? Anything else you'd like to talk about that we could go over first? Any of those deep burning questions? Okay, so we're going to review some of the areas we've talked about in the past, just briefly, and then just go forward from there. So one of the things that we found to be really effective in a number of different ways is those scheduled family meetings. We encourage you to meet once a week, review important individual activities, and review your calendar so people know what's happening, and also so you can have that support if necessary. Having all the family participate as part of that scheduled meeting with assignments, leading, taking minutes, giving input, providing ideas, all of that. And do that from a very young age with children. I think that's really a great way to get them involved as part of the family, and also it gives them some great skills as they progress throughout their lifetime. Many people that we work with have maybe never had a chance to talk to someone in any level. Sometimes they're very shy, sometimes it's just they just never had an opportunity. The family did not do that. This is a scheduled meeting every week where children know they're going to be asked to do certain things, allows them to expand their ideas, allows them to research things if they need to get some answers to questions, allows them to actually be a little more successful, I think, even as they go throughout their school career. Many of us are asked to speak in front of groups. Many of us are not excited to do it. Many of us sometimes have other difficulties or disabilities to do that. That's one of the things that has been important to do. Even in my case, I grew up, I stuttered, and still stutter now. And I obviously give thousands of presentations, or given thousands of presentations in my lifetime, and spoken to hundreds of thousands of people all over the country, and all kinds of strange things. And still, I still am nervous when I speak to people, because when I speak, sometimes I speak very quickly, to try and get through my stutter so I don't stutter. So having done that and having been told from a very young age that I stuttered and have special classes and stuff in that, was very interesting to me to see how that's progressed now as people continue to stutter, obviously, and see what the new educational opportunities are for people who do stutter and what is done kind of across the country for people who have that difficulty or disability, or you'd like to call it. So I think that's something that's been interesting to me, and having grown up in a family where we all spoke quite often as a group and were asked to be part of family meetings and things, that helped me a lot growing up. So I didn't have that fear, and and growing up with brothers and people that played sports, and I played sports. It was interesting having that opportunity to have people tell me, "Oh, you're just stop talking. You can't talk, whatever." But having done it in a family situation where I could go punch my brothers if I wanted to, right? Just do something or say, "Hey, stop, leave me alone," whatever. And having parents who were patient with me provided a great opportunity for me to learn to do better as I grew and was able to do more things. So I think that's an interesting way to learn with those meetings. So we talk about beginning each meeting with a positive action that occurred during the week. So what's something that was positive that occurred, something that would be nice to start your meeting with. So some kind of a positive activity, a positive saying. We used to have people compliment everyone when they came in with some of the programs we present. So for every meeting you start with one compliment from everyone in that group. So just ideas of something you can do. Just wonder if anybody tried that, if anybody has any comments about what I just shared about even stuttering. And I saw a couple people join. Lori, Catherine, we're glad to have you with us. Okay, well, I encourage you to try to have that scheduled meeting once a week if you can. Give it a try, see what people think of that. Creating good goals, good super smart goals if you can, and continue to try that throughout your weeks. Okay, so I pulled just a few slides out of some of the presentations we've done here over the last 6 weeks. Talk about some of the human development things. We talk about some of those basic virtues, age when things happen. Just as we start wondering what's going on with our children, loved ones, family members, what's happening. We're talking about different ages, what we expect happens, or what we expect to happen with those groups. So we've looked at some of this with Dr. Erickson, just one that we pulled up just to try and look at a little bit. Trust versus mistrust, the big ones that start when children are young, autonomy versus shame, those types of things. And just something to think about as you go forward. That again, not everything falls perfectly into these age groups, but it's something that as we researched it, there are things that we expect to occur when we're talking about basic development of children's personality and psychosocial development. So things to look at as you go forward with your children or young ones, or as you get older, even have your own children. Okay, major theorists of child development. I just put this on here just so people could have some of this information again. Some positive, some not so positive things that people have done, but just information for your documentation only. One of the things that we always try and talk about is peer pressure. We talk about talking with your family, children, loved ones about peers. What's the pressure going to be like when they go out into the world? And I know that that's something that people don't like to hear about often, but peer pressure exists and still exists, will exist probably forever. It's what we expect to happen. These are some simple things and some tips to share with your children. Stay away from peers who pressure you to do things that seem wrong or dangerous. Obviously pretty common, what you expect, but we don't always know what our children are doing. That's something that I've found was difficult for me even to know. We trusted our children, we trusted what they were doing, and sometimes we found that they were not trustworthy. There's some things we had to change a little bit at times because there were things that occurred that were dangerous. I had 4 daughters, and so some things happened we did not expect. So we had some learning opportunities for us and for our family. So we made some changes to those learning opportunities. So that's what happened. So learn to say no, practice how to avoid or get out of situations feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Telling children they can't go to a party, can't do this, can't do that sometimes seems harsh, but if you feel that that's something they should not do or you have a reason, tell them that, and just be consistent if you do it across the board or across for one or two children, whatever it might be. And also having children understand and know that you can help them with a situation that they may be unable to help themselves with. I think I mentioned before, we used to have a code word for if something was happening at a party and our children needed to guess, wanted to leave or get out. And they could text or call us and just say a certain word, and we knew what was happening. We'd go right and get them. There was no question. There was no arguing. There was no, we didn't care what time it was. We did it on a regular basis with all of them. And I think it's something that we will continue with our grandchildren or other loved ones too. We still continue that. If anybody needs something, there's no question we can come and get them and help them wherever they are, whatever they're doing. We just expect that as something that we are comfortable to do. So spending time with other kids who resist peer pressure, so other people saying no. So being around good children is a great thing to be. And if you can, you want to know that child and have people come to your home. If you have that ability and people can come, I think that becomes very important. Having children who are trustworthy in your home with other children, I think allows that peer pressure to be a more positive experience. In our family, we tried to make our home the fun home where people could come and get popcorn, have something to drink, whatever it might be, play. Of course, having daughters, we had some daughters that played sports and we did not. So sometimes they'd come and study. For a while, my wife did all the hair for almost all the girls in high school, which was very interesting to me. Especially at the time we only had one bathroom when we were living in a rental home. So having, I don't know how many, 10 girls in our home all day long, was really made it very exciting for us and for me. But it was okay. We learned some fun things. And even I learned to do, I could even braid and use curling irons on children's hair. So that's what happens when you have a wife who goes and does an internship at a facility and you become Mr. Mom for the summer. So things happen. So peer pressure is unusual because some of the children thought it was pretty funny that me, as a dad, was able to do some of their hair. So kind of an interesting thing to happen. So it kind of reduced the peer pressure on my children because they knew that there were parents that were good parents out there. If you have problems with peer pressure, talk to a grown-up you trust, like a parent, teacher, or school counselor. Somebody is pressuring you into something you don't want to do, always ask. And again, encourage your children and family members to talk with you about that. So if there isn't a question, that you'll support them with their conversations. Okay, protective factors, risk and protective factors. We'll talk about some of these definitions. Let's pull it up again. Protective factor, a characteristic at the biological, psychological, family, or community level, associated with lower likelihood of problem outcomes or reduces negative impact or risk behavior on problem outcomes. A risk factor is a characteristic at the same levels, associated with a higher likelihood of problem outcomes. We have tables, we show tables about some of the 5 domains: youth, family, community, and society. So there are things we know that are protective and risk factors, especially when we talk about drugs and alcohol, those types of things. We know that there's things that we want to work with. Protective factor, again, might be even as simple as going to school, doing homework. The risk factors are not going to school, not doing homework, being involved with people who you don't want to be involved with, or having confusing something going on in someone's life. So there's opportunities to know what that means. And I think that's something we want to look at also.
Tim?
Yes.
I have a comment by Laurie that I almost missed. Sorry, Laurie, regarding, I'm going to say household rules. She said she had a daughter's friend bring her boyfriend yesterday to her house. They both went in her daughter's room to wake her daughter. It made her uncomfortable because we don't have members of the opposite sex in bedrooms. That was a rule when I was growing up. I remember that one.
That's good. That's actually, yeah, that's something that I guess maybe I'm getting too old, but when we grew up, you really didn't have, you didn't bring people to your rooms that were of the opposite sex. It didn't seem to happen. And I've seen with my daughters and granddaughters, well, I've seen that change throughout the years also. My grandchildren don't think it's a big deal. They bring their friends into their rooms, and they're not that old. Some of them are, young teenagers, 13, 14 years old. But it's not unusual to have members of the opposite sex in their rooms. And I thought, that's really unusual, guys. Why are you doing that? It's not a big deal. We're all friends. And I thought, okay, interesting. So yeah, it does change a little bit. That's a good comment. I like that comment. Thank you. Okay, so SAMHSA definition, substance and alcohol, actually it's substance, mental health society of America, whatever it is now, definition. So SAMHSA basically involved in drugs and alcohol. So risk factors we talk about, they're associated with a higher likelihood of developing a problem, low impulse control, peer support, all that kind of stuff, substance use. Protective factors, academic achievement, parental bonding, and family cohesion. Understanding risk and protective factors essential to prevention. That's some of the stuff that I do. So when I talk about risk and protective factors in this context, I'm talking about trying to keep people from being involved with drugs and alcohol. But we know it doesn't involve other areas too. Sexuality, all of that is involved with risk and protective factors for people. So there are different definitions out there if people want to look for those. Again, it's just kind of information for you to look at. And I'm blanking on SAMHSA definition, but that's okay. All right. Key features, they exist in multiple contexts. They're correlated and cumulative. Individual factors can be associated with multiple problems. Risk and protective factors are influential over time. So I think as we look at risk and protective factors, we can reduce those risk areas and increase protective factors for children. That becomes very important. There's actually a survey called the SHARPS survey that comes out from high schools, middle schools, and elementary school, which actually talk about what they can do to reduce the incidence of drug and alcohol use in communities. That's something that's risk and protective factors we're trying to limit. And we're talking about keeping children in school, watching their mental health, reducing suicide, and reducing substance use disorders across the board. And they found that those risk factors are very important. And some of the things that when they're surveying children, people, we've all heard about, parents are a very important indicator of whether someone will use drugs or alcohol. If a parent is permissive regarding drugs and alcohol and thinks it's a positive thing, that can be an issue. And for me, having grown up in a family where alcohol was a big part of what happened, it wasn't unusual to have alcohol around. And to see what happened in our groups and people we worked with and people that we did stuff with growing up and all of that, it was interesting to see what risk and protective factors, what the impact was of those in our families versus other families, and to see how that's progressed over time, and then to see those instances of things that occurred now changing. So what I'm really saying here is there's lots of issues that are happening now that maybe 20 years ago would not be the same. People trying substances like smoking pot or something, trying that for the first time. Now someone can try a drug or alcohol for the first time. And because of fentanyl being inside, which is fentanyl is another synthetic opioid, man-made opioid that's being made basically to kill people. It's a very 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin. A terrible drug being manufactured all across the world now, shipped here, mimicking almost every kind of drug there is, right down to Excedrin, being made to look like that. And people trying things, as we know, adolescents especially, really take risks. And that's part of what happens. That's actually their brain chemistry is to take a risk. That's what they're designed to do. So developmentally, they are not risk averse, they're risk takers. So when we talk about taking a risk, those same children that would at one point maybe would smoke pot, now that same pot can be contaminated with a synthetic fentanyl, and that child can die from that one smoke of pot. So that one toke. So there's things that are occurring that really have changed across the world now based on what's happening in drugs and alcohol and in people just having no value for human life. So there are lots of issues occurring there in many areas. So That's enough about risk protective factors. So I don't mean to talk
Okay,
about that too
we do
much.
have a question. Catherine wants to
Okay.
know if you have any tips on helping kids develop impulse control.
Um, One of the things that's interesting, may seem unusual, but talk to children about what impulse is and why they may feel that way. And that they're hardwired as adolescents and as children to actually have those impulses, and that that's something that's going to happen to them. And maybe we talk about having children or adolescents recognize what impulse is and have them tell you how they think they can control it. Then you direct them to some of those positive ideas about controlling impulses. So we talk about taking a moment and counting to 10, for example, delaying gratification. What's an impulse? What's gratification? What are they trying to do? So some of those, to me, it sounds kind of simple. Other people tell me it sounds simple too, but it's not really that simple to do. Telling a child or a young adult to just take a moment and think about what you're going to do before you do it. A lot of times you get the eye roll from your family or students, whoever. But if you talk to them again and say, what do you think an impulse is? And if you have this impulse or you have an inclination to do something, what would you do differently? Or if you've had an opportunity to make a mistake in the past because of poor impulse control, what can you do better this next time? So working on that becomes, I think, really important, and talking through it. I think a lot of times as parents and as caregivers, we don't always define things well. We don't think clearly about what we're being asked, and we sometimes answer things without, I guess, giving good answers. And so thinking about that clearly becomes important. The thing about it, even I'm talking to you guys, there's so many things I want to say in this last presentation. I'm thinking too many things in my head. I'm thinking, what's my impulse control like today? Because I'm going to do too much here. I've got to slow my brain down a little bit and think about what I want to do differently and make sure that I'm giving good information. So talking with a child, especially a child who may have ADHD, also start adding in some of those other components of mental health issues or mental health concerns or opportunities for them. What can they do to change their response to, again, realize it's a response to a stimulus. What's that response to a stimulus? Can they do it in a positive way, or is it going to be a negative way? That's something just to think about. I hope I answered the questions. Okay. Interactions in the family, family situations, heightened risks for later drug use. So we talk about some of these things. I just bring this up again because, again, it has lots of impacts on families and on caregivers. Lack of attachment, effective parenting, abusing drugs, all of that. You want to try and limit, obviously. You want to have a strong bond between parents and children. You want to be involved in the child's life. Clear limits and consistent enforcement of discipline. Interactions. We know it's going to be difficult. If we're doing interactions, it becomes a problem at times. It can be a risk for children and adolescents. Again, we see some of these things before: poor social behavior, social skills, academic failure, associated with drug abusing peers. When you're around people who misuse drugs often, some things are going to happen. It's just the reality of what occurs. Whether even a child wants to or a young adult wants to, it's just going to be, eventually becomes normal, the normal behavior, and that's what happens. They'll try things that they don't mean to try, or just kind of slips in because of what they're doing on a regular basis. So, all right. I've got a lot of things, risk protective factors. I'm going to go through this. This was some of the factors we had talked about a little bit. You'll see that on the left, the risk factors, protective factors on the right. I think one of the big things that we want to do as a family, having a stable home environment, form and supportive parenting, secure attachments with such significant careers. Risk factors, again, family disharmony or breakup, in form of child abuse or neglect, harsh or inconsistent parenting, career with mental illness or substance abuse. So basically having things that occur kind of throughout their lifetime. We've talked about these before in the past. But I think it's a good thing as a reminder that what we do does make a difference. How we respond to our children, our family, our services we're providing, life events in society, how we respond, but it does have an impact on those children or family members we're with from the time they're very young. A lot of times we don't notice things that occur because this becomes something that becomes normalized to us. And that's something that we always have to go back and think about what's occurring with our families. That's why I do like the idea of sitting down once a week and reviewing what's going on with our families, what's happening with that group. Going to those meetings with your teachers, your children's teachers, with your teachers, whoever it might be, getting information that's going to be beneficial to your family and to your loved ones. That's something that becomes very important. And don't just take the easy road out with, yes, I understand, yep, that's great, whatever, responding in those ways. Respond the way, what does that mean that my child is doing well? Can you give me an example of what my child is doing well in school? Can you give me an example of when my child is not doing well in school? And I think a lot of times, especially children and adolescents who are kind of in the middle of the road where they don't do anything that's really alarming to anybody. There's no worry about what they're doing. Sometimes those children are the ones that can do very well, but also they're not challenged often by things because they don't have to be. So that's something to even talk with your child or loved one about. How can we challenge you a little bit more? Is there something else we can do? Talk to the teachers about that. I think it's one of the things that so my children growing up and even myself growing up, I was never really challenged. I was considered basically a jock. So I didn't have to do certain things. I had my own things that I could do. And people never asked me if I was smart or not. Just a matter of, just do whatever you want. You can play sports, you can do these things. And it's like, well, no, it's not really who I am. I play sports because I like to play sports. That's not who I identify as. But it becomes something that happens to many children. I've had my children and grandchildren have that same thing occur with them. And I think we have to challenge that a little bit more with someone can be well-rounded and just play sports, and sports aren't their lives, and they can be musical, but that doesn't have to be all they do. So challenge some of those areas as a group. All right. Move lives, all examples. Yeah, this is just one we talk about more what to understand as children move through different life stages. Active listening, appropriate response, simplify actions for age, communication. That's all. Talk about that. Create a plan. Yes, has other risk protective factors as just a heading. But we want to know that each child is unique. Listen to your child and communicate with them. Read to them, teach them, educate. Be a positive role model. Get to know children's friends and family. Be active participants in their lives. Discipline with kindness and consistency. Show love in actions, words, and self-care. Support setting goals, schedules, allow mistakes. It's something we also don't allow very often. I have a problem with that too, is allowing anyone to make a mistake. I always want to help them not make mistakes. And I've had to learn to allow people to make mistakes so that they can understand and learn from those things that they do that are incorrect. Providing positive experiences, service, moral instruction, experiences, those kind of things. Give opportunities for hard work. And we talked about ideas that your family might do. We'll talk about creating the plan for that child. I think it's very important to remember that children are unique. We don't all fall into the same realm. We don't fall into the same area. We're all different. And I think that becomes something that you learn with age that's important. And I think even as a young parent, sometimes you're just trying to make things work. You're trying to get your life going. You're trying to put food on the table. You're trying to go through school, whatever it might be. Sometimes those things get pushed aside. But I think remembering that each child is unique and has their own skills and abilities becomes important for your family, but also for the community. We need people that have differences of experience, different education, different levels of opportunities. We need a lot of different things. So work on those if you can. This is the mental and physical health introduction stuff. We talked about the basic human needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I just really like this just because it talks about how we need to have certain levels of food, water, all those things. We have to be able to breathe air, obviously. We have to have security of body, employment, resources. So the physiological safety, love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. That's what we're talking about here. Being able to have things that work. That's something that we want to do. We need to have food to live. That's something that has to happen. Someone has to be able to either make food or get food or have the ability to purchase food. So that's something to think about as you go through your life and as other people start with their life and their lifetimes. We need to have that. So I'm not to say too much about this, just kind of interesting presentation. Like this bottom of the triangle basically is the physiological needs. There's certain needs we have as a family and loved ones, and caregivers. We need those things to be there. If not, we're going to be in trouble. Okay, so food, basic human needs. We need calories to grow, protein, fat, carbs, all those kind of things. Water, you need sufficient hydration. Water cannot, if you don't have water, you can't process food or remove wastes. Shelter, you need shelter from freezing sun, opportunities, those freezing cold, wind, sun, and rain, all that kind of things. Sleep, that's something we don't talk a lot about, but sleep is very important. We need that time for our brain to process new information. We need to sleep. Connection, physical or emotional, with other humans to release certain hormones like oxytocin, that becomes very important also. Novelty creates opportunity to learn, the potential to fail. Stimulates dopamine released in the brain. So again, food, water, shelter, sleep, adults, connection, novelty. Those are very important things to think about as what physical health needs are. Physical contact, oxytocin, dopamine are increased with physical contact. Quiet reflection and meditation. Have me time for families. Mental health is necessary. I should say for me time for families to improve mental health. That's what that should be. So even having a child have some time to themselves is something that we don't often think about. But having that playtime, creative playtime, becomes very important for a child. Having time to be by themselves with chalk, crayon, pencil, whatever it might be, and letting them just have time on their own to do things. Sleeping, we talk about that, processing new information, get outdoors. Oops, sorry. Turn off electronics, play, enjoy moments together, childhood memories. It's an important time for creative self-expression. Exercise, vital to our mental health, helps with many different areas of mental health. Good nutrition, nutrients help regulate through biological rhythms, greater efficiency. Novelty, again, novelty is the opportunity to learn and to fail. We talked about resilience, some of these things. We've talked about strength of character, self-awareness, self-regulation, mental agility, connection, optimism. Those are some resilience competencies that we've talked a little bit about, but you can certainly look at that a little bit more at the Penn web page and see what you think of these. Something to do with the family, especially if you have some older children. It's a great way to have them think of things a little bit differently. Communication, again, we know communication is important. And SAMHSA does ask us to try and get children thinking that you disapprove of underage drinking or drug misuse. Show you care about your child's health, wellness, and success. Show a good source of information about alcohol and other drugs. Show you're paying attention. You'll discourage risky behaviors. Build your child's skills and strategies for avoiding underage drinking and drug use. Another thing we're going to talk about for the last part of this, just for a moment, I put down just some simple resources that are here. I call them simple, but they're some great opportunities for people to get information for their families or for loved ones, especially if there's any problems in the family. One of the things that we're running into more often, or I'm running into more often in what I do here as a assistant professor at Utah State Extension, are people that need assistance and have some significant issues within their families and their structure. That's something that we're trying to work on. But whether you speak Spanish or not, there's some intervention resources from La Familia. So it's a great group there. I just kind of pull up a couple of things so you have some information available to you. But that's, some of the Spanish speaking, those intervention resources are done very well. Some great people there. The family place, again, great people there doing things. Strengthening families, protecting children, which I kind of highlight because that's pretty important, I think. We're talking about what we're doing here with parents and families. And many of these places allow people to come in and just talk to them and have a conversation, even without any cost or that type of thing. They're available to give people resources, even on their websites. So it's kind of a cool situation here in Utah, and in our community, there's a lot of people that want to help. Of course, we have the Bear River Health Department. They do lots of things also, strengthen the community, strengthen the people here. Something you can always talk to or call about. The Utah Division of Child and Family Services, keeping children safe from abuse and neglect, domestic violence services, working with communities and strengthening families. What a great opportunity to talk with someone about that if necessary, if you need that. One of the other things that's been surprising to me is finding there's so many needs and resources necessary in groups that deny there's any problem. And what I'm finding, and what I found in my career, is the more things are denied, the more problems there may be. When I first came back to Utah, from New York, I was surprised at some of the things that were occurring, and some of the comments that I received from people when we did talk about things that were happening regarding substance use disorders, suicide prevention, domestic violence, assault, whatever it might be. I was always surprised that people would not tell me the truth. I think that's something that we're still working on. I think it's something we always will be needing to work on in our communities, having people tell us what's really happening. So the official site of Cache County, Utah Community Resources has a list of local services, which a bunch of these are already on there. So it's a great place to go to and get more information if you have questions regarding almost anything. Children's Justice Center, there's lots of things available there to get information about that. Or should say get information about any needs you may have for a child or family member. One of the things that becomes difficult for many people is when they get told you have to pay for a service. And that makes it very difficult. We don't want to have people not be able to get the services they need because of issues with payment. That's something I'm finding more and more is that some of our resource providers and service providers are actually getting to the point where there are some grants and things available for people. And they're also willing to work with those that need services and maybe don't have insurance or insurance that's going to help pay for some things by allowing them to do some things a little differently. Setting payment aside for a bit or trying to get grants or things for that family member or loved one to get the care they need. One of the things I also find is that many people become very frustrated because it does take a long time at times to get services for someone that needs it right away. And that is difficult, especially if you have someone that may be in partial crisis or the family's in crisis. I think that becomes issues, and calling law enforcement isn't always a great idea either. I love law enforcement, do a lot of stuff with people, law enforcement, love my friends, families, loved ones, I'm part of that community. I was part of the EMS community for many years, so I worked directly with EMS, fire, law enforcement, people from all over the country and the world doing things with that. And it was interesting to see what's happened kind of going forward with some of those areas, with people really trying to do good things and having some issues of their own. So we never know what's happening in that world, and we want to make sure that we don't have people not listening to the right things at times. So community resources, we talked about that a little bit. USU Therapy Clinic, but actually USU does have and offers sometimes reduced or free services depending on need, especially in like marriage and family therapy groups. Actually, marriage and family therapy groups on campus that are being trained. So master's level students in training to be family therapists who are supervised by a licensed therapist. And they allow people to actually get and talk with people about what's happening in their lives. and do it at a reduced cost. So it's a great opportunity for people to get in the therapy clinics if necessary. So that's another option for people. Federal Association of Governments provides low-cost housing, opportunities, grants, those kind of things for specific members of the population, especially those with mental health issues. Cash food pantry, assist with food and clothing at no cost. 211 does have lists of local resources and has great lists of resources for people if necessary or if needed by those that have some challenges. So there's a lot of things available for people on that 211 line. So please use it if you have any questions. Last is, yeah, it's kind of just a quick overview of what's available in the community here. I didn't know what we wanted to go into, so it'll be more of a conversation again about this, but I would encourage you to contact me if you have questions regarding substance use disorders, clinics, whatever it might be, suicide prevention, someone who may have significant mental health issues, mental illness. Contact me and we'll give you more information if necessary. I have lots of resources. I've worked with many people in our community. There's lots of things that are going on in the community currently to help people who are having significant problems. We're trying to do some good things. It's not always working as quickly as we like, but there are a lot of resources available with me. For example, I'm on 3 suicide prevention coalitions just in our area within Cache, Rich, and Box County. So there's a lot of things happening here that we can provide help for. And if there's any questions, looks like Lori's back into, have people maybe lose it for a moment, come back in.
I haven't seen any more questions come up in the chat, but thank you for putting out that list. Oh, there's one coming now. Sometimes people just don't know where to get help. And yes, let's see. Lori said, if you do this class again, I think it would be helpful to have a copy of notes so that we can more easily follow along and take notes. Ooh.
Yep, the idea was actually you guys would get copies of these PowerPoint presentations.
Cool.
That's what the idea
So
was.
Tim and I will work on that, and I can share those in a link when we do maybe the final replay. Does that work for you, Tim?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay. Laurie, does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. Well, there you are. Okay.
That's a great question. So I thought we were doing that, so I get confused.
Yeah. Well, there's so many balls in the air all the time that we need a prompt every once in a while.
We do need those. We need to be reminded of those. So I can even speak today. I'm having a problem speaking today myself. My goodness, I don't know. We have some of those days, I guess. This is one of my days to not be able to speak as clearly as I would like. But I do appreciate all of you coming to these, though, and listening, and hopefully you've gotten something worthwhile from these presentations. I do appreciate being asked to do it by My Discovery Destination. They do some really cool things. Got some great work, great people that care about their community. I think that's really amazing. Cheryl Lee, who's done so many cool things for our community for many years, has been involved in this for a long time. And I think that she's to be commended for what she does, along with Megan and the groups that they work with, because not everybody does this stuff and wants to do it.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate that.
I'm glad to do that. We don't always talk a lot about things like that because we always take that step back and say, oh, we're just doing it because we have to. Most people don't have to do these things. So we appreciate you, Cheryl Lee, too.
Yes, thank you very much. I guess I was muted when I said it before, but thank you. And you know what, Tim, we would love to be listed on those resources as well, because our program is available to everyone at no cost, and it's a great way to make intentional parenting easy. So
Yep, you guys are always part of it.
Catherine has a question. Did we get that? Oh, maybe we answered that. Never mind. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I know we talked, yeah. So we'll try to make this available for people so they can have some of these lists. And I also have obviously resources for things that we can provide, even for substance use stuff, as well as suicide prevention. So like I said, we have many resources. We at times have interns that create things for us. So if anybody has questions or you guys have lists of things you'd like to see differently, we can also provide some of those too, if people need those. So there's some more information we have here about references here. So thank you for doing this. Appreciate you listening. If you have any questions, please contact us. We'll get some information out to you again. Thank you again for being here, and hopefully you have a great day and you
Yes,
Enjoy the rest of your
thanks.
time.
And I know Tim has shared his email at the USU Extension before. And if you ever want to get a hold of Shirley or me at My Discovery Destination, you can email Watson with 2 T's, WATTSON at mydiscoverydestination.com and watch for the replay. Next week, we'll start a mindfulness series. And Tim, thank you again for all your hard work and for showing up every week and never making me have to call you and remind you. I love it.
That's good. That was just purely luck though, but thank you very much. Thank you guys.
All right. See you next week, everybody.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Hey, Kim.
Yes.
Hold on. Let me pause the recording.